the perfect illusion. Every family has secrets, but some secrets are deadly. The Johnson family was admired in their small town, a picturesque household that seemed to embody the American dream. Father, David Johnson, was a respected businessman. Mother, Elaine, was a devoted homemaker, and their two children, Mark and Emily, were bright, polite, and ambitious. From the outside, nothing seemed amiss, yet underneath the polished exterior, a darkness was slowly taking root, one that would eventually destroy the family entirely. David Johnson had built his reputation carefully. His business, a modest construction company, earned him respect, trust, and influence. He was the kind of man who shook hands with confidence, smiled with warmth, and made neighbors feel secure. Elaine was equally respected, known for her volunteer work at the local library and her skill in hosting community events. People admired the Johnsons for their cohesion, their charm, and their apparent stability. But appearances are rarely reliable. The first hints of trouble were subtle. David had a temper, small at first, almost dismissible. He criticized Elaine quietly, then Mark, then Emily, each reprimand delivered as advice or guidance. At family gatherings, whispers could be heard from those who knew him slightly better, claiming that David was controlling, calculating, a man who expected perfection in every detail. Elaine, in private, appeared anxious, her laughter forced, her smile tight. Neighbors began noticing that the children were unusually quiet when alone with their father, though they were lively in public settings. Emily, the eldest, began keeping a journal, pages filled with descriptions of heated arguments, strange disappearances of family heirlooms, and times when her father's anger escalated beyond reason. She noted every small inconsistency, every lie, every unexplained bruise on her younger brother. Mark, who was 10 years old at the time, was quiet and withdrawn. But he had a keen sense of observation. He learned to avoid triggering his father, to walk on eggshells, to anticipate consequences before they happened. One incident marked the beginning of the unraveling. During a family dinner, David exploded at Mark over a minor mistake. Voices rose, chairs scraped, and the family dog cowered in a corner. Elaine tried to intervene, but David's authority was overwhelming. Mark retreated to his room, silent tears running down his face. Emily wrote in her journal late into the night, her words laced with fear and confusion. She could sense that the family secret, though unspoken, was growing, twisting into something dangerous. Outside, life continued normally. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues remained unaware. The Johnsons hosted barbecues, celebrated birthdays, and attended church on Sundays. To the public, the family was unshakable, but the cracks were widening inside the walls of their home. Every raised voice, every slammed door, and every secret whispered in the night was a warning. A signal of a storm that no one could predict but the family itself. It was during one of these quiet nights that Emily discovered something she was not meant to find, a locked drawer in her father's office, filled with letters, photographs, and documents hinting at financial schemes, hidden debts, and connections to people she had never met. The secrets of her father's life outside the family were beginning to seep into their home. Emily felt a surge of curiosity and fear. She knew that opening this drawer could change everything. But she also knew it was inevitable. And so, the stage was set. The perfect family illusion was starting to crack, and the dark undercurrents beneath the surface were ready to pull everyone into a tragedy none of them could escape. The secrets that refused to stay hidden. The discovery of the locked drawer changed everything for Emily. What began as a flicker of curiosity quickly became an obsession. Each photograph, each letter, each document revealed a side of her father that was unrecognizable. Financial ledgers showed suspicious transfers and unpaid debts. Letters from unknown individuals hinted at intimidation and threats. A photograph of David shaking hands with a man whose presence in town was considered dangerous sent a chill down her spine. Emily realized that the family she thought she knew was built on lies, and that the calm surface she had trusted was a farce aid. Mark noticed a change in Emily almost immediately. Her quiet vigilance at night, her whispered questions, and the tense energy that seemed to linger around her were unlike anything he had seen before. Emily shared what she had found with him cautiously, fearful of their father discovering her intrusion. Mark, too young to understand all the financial intricacies, understood one thing clearly. Something dangerous was happening, and it involved their father. For the first time, the siblings felt a bond that went beyond normal family closeness. They were united by fear and a shared secret that had the power to change everything. David, meanwhile, continued to project normalcy in public. He attended meetings, hosted neighborhood events, and smiled confidently in photographs. Behind closed doors, however, the tension was mounting. The atmosphere in the house was thick with unspoken threats. Elaine, aware that something was amiss, tried to maintain calm, but her efforts were like trying to hold back a flood with her bare hands. She pleaded with David to consider therapy, to attend counseling with the children, or at the very least, to ease his controlling behavior. His response was always dismissive and sometimes frighteningly sharp. One evening, the tension reached a breaking point. A minor argument over household chores escalated into a screaming match. David's fury was palpable. Mark, scared beyond reason, retreated to his room. Emily, sensing the danger, decided it was time to take action. She began secretly documenting everything: audio recordings, notes, and even photographs of threatening letters. She felt a growing responsibility to protect her brother and her mother, as well as a sense that one day this evidence might be the only thing keeping them safe. The siblings soon uncovered more than just financial secrets. Hidden messages between David and associates revealed manipulation, coercion, and threats toward people outside the family. Emily realized that their father was living a double life, one that could easily harm them if exposed. The house that once felt like a safe haven was now a place where every sound could signal danger. The walls held whispers of a past filled with questionable decisions and a present teetering on the edge of disaster. Elaine, though frightened, found her own way to resist. She began recording conversations and keeping track of her husband's absences and strange behaviors. Every day she felt trapped, caught between the need to protect her children and the desire to maintain peace. She feared the consequences of confrontation, but she also understood that doing nothing was no longer an option. The family was being pulled into a spiral from which escape seemed impossible. In the midst of this, Emily and Mark began to notice other strange patterns. People who visited the house asked unusual questions or seemed unnaturally interested in the family. Random calls came late at night from unknown numbers, and David grew increasingly paranoid, accusing Elaine and the children of conspiring against him. The tension in the house escalated, creating an environment where fear was constant and trust was absent. By the end of this chapter of their lives, it was clear that the Johnsons were no longer a family in the traditional sense. Secrets had multiplied, tension had become the norm, and the calm exterior they presented to the world was about to collapse completely. Each revelation deepened the divide, and the children understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the storm that was coming could not be avoided. The dangerous connections. Emily's curiosity was no longer innocent. The documents and letters she had found had hinted at a network of people her father associated with, but it was only when she began piecing the information together that she realized the full scope of danger. David's world extended far beyond the neat, respectable streets of their small town. Hidden within the envelopes were contracts, meeting notes, and photographs connecting him to people with criminal backgrounds, some of whom had reputations that sent shivers down the spines of even the most daring locals. The realization hit Emily hard. Her father, the man she had trusted most in the world, was involved in dealings that could easily put the entire family at risk. Each day, she grew more anxious. Mark, though younger, could sense her fear. He had begun noticing unusual visitors, strangers who appeared at odd hours, and mysterious phone calls that David would take in another room. Even Elaine could feel the tension, though she struggled to comprehend the extent of her husband's secret life. The house had transformed from a place of safety into a cage, where the rules were dictated by an unpredictable man who could not be reasoned with. Emily decided to investigate further, carefully scanning every letter, photograph, and document for clues. She discovered correspondence between David and a local businessman known for shady dealings. Notes indicated that large sums of money had changed hands, with vague mentions of favors, threats, and promises that could not be ignored. A particular envelope contained a photograph of her father standing beside a man with a cold, calculating stare. Emily's stomach churned. This was not just about money. It was about control, influence, and a world she had never been allowed to glimpse. Her growing awareness of danger was mirrored by a shift in David's behavior. He became increasingly suspicious of Elaine and the children, questioning them about their activities and their friends. Simple requests for permission became interrogations. Every minor mistake, whether real or imagined, was met with rage. The fear that had lingered in the house now became a constant, oppressive presence. Even Mark, who had always been quiet and careful, began to walk on eggshells, terrified of accidentally provoking his father. Emily's investigation also uncovered personal threats. Letters indicated that certain individuals outside the family had been promised favors, and in return, they expected loyalty. David's dealings were not always with distant strangers. Some of these people were right in the community, observing, waiting, and ready to act if their expectations were not met. Emily felt trapped between exposing her father, which could unleash dangerous consequences, and remaining silent, which could endanger them all in another way. Elaine, increasingly aware of the growing threat, tried to mediate. She approached David cautiously, suggesting therapy, mediation, or even involving law enforcement. Her suggestions were met with fury. David insisted that nothing was wrong and accused her of undermining him, creating a tension that escalated daily. The house, once warm and welcoming, had become a battlefield. Every word, every gesture was calculated, measured, or feared. Silence had become the only safe refuge. One night, Emily and Mark were awakened by the sound of footsteps outside their window. Peering through the blinds, they saw a car parked under the streetlight, its occupants lingering too long for any casual visit. Fear gripped them. They realized that the danger they had only read about in letters and documents had moved closer to home. The outside world was intruding into their private sanctuary, and there was no telling what would happen next. It was clear that the family's secrets could no longer remain hidden. David's double life, which had seemed like an abstract danger, was now a tangible threat. Every day the children and Elaine lived under his shadow, unsure of what might happen, caught between loyalty, fear, and the instinct for survival. The tension was unbearable, and the family dynamic, once seemingly perfect, was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. The breaking point. Tension in the Johnson household reached its peak on a rainy evening in late October. The weather outside seemed to mirror the storm brewing inside the home. David's unpredictable temperament had grown worse over the weeks, and his children and Elaine lived in constant anticipation of his next outburst. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door, every ring of the telephone set nerves on edge. Fear had become a permanent resident in the house, one that shaped every word, every gesture, and every decision. That evening, what began as a seemingly minor argument about household chores spiraled into something far more dangerous. David accused Mark of intentionally ignoring instructions. Elaine attempted to mediate, but David's fury escalated rapidly. Voices raised, footsteps pounded against the floor, and the children cowered in their rooms. For Mark, fear had transformed into paralysis. Emily, ever vigilant, realized that the confrontation was moving beyond words and threats. It was becoming physical. The children, guided by instinct and Emily's careful planning, sought refuge in their secret room, a small attic space they had designated as a hideaway in emergencies. The room was cramped, filled with old boxes and forgotten furniture, yet it offered them a sense of safety. From this vantage point, Emily could observe her father's movements without being seen. She could hear the rage in his voice, the anger bouncing off the walls, and the sharp retorts from Elaine that only seemed to fuel him further. For the first time, Emily truly understood the danger they were in, and she realized that documenting their father's actions might not be enough to protect them. Meanwhile, David's anger had drawn attention beyond the house. Neighbors called in whispers about the shouting, fearing for the children's safety. Yet David's reputation as a respected businessman and community figure shielded him from immediate suspicion. He smiled in public, attended meetings, and waved to neighbors, all while the chaos inside his home escalated unchecked. The contrast between his public and private personas was jarring, and it made the danger even more unpredictable. That night marked a turning point. Emily, armed with the evidence she had been collecting, decided it was time to confront the reality of their situation. She whispered to Mark about her plan to reach out to trusted authorities the next day, hoping that intervention could prevent disaster. The siblings were united in their fear, but also in their determination to survive. They understood that secrecy had protected them so far, but it could not last forever. The threat outside the house, the dangerous individuals their father was connected to, was looming closer each day, and they could no longer wait passively. Elaine, too, realized the urgency. She began contacting friends who could offer support, seeking advice from lawyers and counselors, and gathering resources for an emergency escape plan. Her maternal instincts had evolved into an acute awareness that the family's survival depended not just on keeping the peace, but on taking calculated, decisive action. Fear had sharpened her focus, and she could no longer ignore the mounting danger. As the night wore on, David retreated to his office, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in weeks, silence fell over the house, heavy and suffocating. Emily and Mark emerged cautiously from their hiding place, their bodies tense, their minds alert. They knew that this temporary calm was fragile, and that the storm had not yet passed. Every action they took from this point forward would be critical, determining not just the immediate safety of the family, but the eventual outcome of the secrets that had been hidden for so long. By dawn, the Johnson family had reached an unspoken understanding survival would require courage, intelligence, and the willingness to face dangers they had never imagined. The household that had once been an illusion of perfection was now a battlefield, and the true test of resilience was only beginning. Confronting the outside threat, the Johnson family understood that hiding from the outside world was no longer an option. The evidence Emily had collected, combined with the growing recklessness of David, had attracted the attention of the wrong people. Letters, phone calls, and subtle threats hinted that David's secret dealings were under scrutiny by associates who demanded loyalty and results. For Emily, Mark, and Elaine, this meant the danger had extended beyond their home, reaching into the streets, the neighborhood, and potentially the wider community. Early one morning, Emily noticed a car parked across the street, its engine idling while the driver stared directly at the Johnson house. She felt her heart race. Mark clutched her hand, the fear they shared deepening as they realized that the family's private struggles were no longer confined to the walls of their home. The outside world, the people David had entangled himself with, were now observing, waiting, and prepared to act. It became clear that if the family did not take decisive steps, the consequences could be fatal. Elaine, driven by maternal instinct and a growing sense of urgency, decided that it was time to confront the threat directly. She reached out to a trusted friend in law enforcement, carefully explaining the situation without revealing every detail about David's illegal dealings. Her aim was to protect her children and herself, to create a buffer between the family and the dangerous people watching them. While she did not have complete evidence to secure immediate intervention, the authorities agreed to increase surveillance and keep the family under a protective watch. This small step offered some relief, but the fear remained tangible, simmering just below the surface. Emily, meanwhile, continued her investigations, determined to uncover the full extent of David's network. She discovered financial trails leading to local businesses, messages from individuals with reputations for intimidation, and records suggesting threats had been carried out against people who did not comply with David's instructions. The magnitude of what she uncovered was overwhelming. Emily realized that the family's survival depended not just on avoiding conflict, but on strategic thinking, patience, and careful planning. Every word spoken, every move made, carried weight. The tension inside the household escalated in response to these external threats. David's paranoia grew, fueled by both real dangers and his own compulsions for control. He accused Elaine of conspiring with outsiders, questioned Emily and Mark relentlessly, and demanded explanations for every unexplained action. The household became a minefield where one wrong word could trigger an explosive confrontation. The children's fear deepened, and Elaine's anxiety was now matched by a steely determination to act when necessary. Despite the fear, there were moments of quiet strategy. Emily and Elaine devised a plan to gather all necessary evidence and prepare for a legal intervention if the situation escalated further. Mark, despite his age, became an active participant in their survival strategy, learning to observe, document, and anticipate the movements of both his father and the external threats. The family, fractured by fear and tension, began to function as a unit with a shared objective: survival and eventual escape from the web of secrecy that had ensnared them. However, even with preparation, the danger could not be entirely avoided. One evening, David confronted Emily directly after discovering her hidden journal and recordings. The confrontation was heated, with accusations, anger, and desperation spilling into the room. Emily, standing her ground, demanded answers and pressed for explanations about the outside threats. For a moment, David seemed to falter, revealing vulnerability beneath his anger. But this glimpse of weakness was fleeting, and it became clear to the family that the situation was spiraling toward a critical, irreversible climax. By the end of this chapter in the Johnson family saga, it was undeniable the family's secrets had unleashed forces that could not be controlled. The threats from David's past associations, combined with the growing tension within the home, had set the stage for a tragedy that would mark the lives of Emily, Mark, and Elaine forever. The tragedy unfolds. The climax of the Johnson family saga arrived with a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Days of fear, suspicion, and constant vigilance had built an invisible wall between the family and the outside world. Emily and Elaine had meticulously prepared for intervention, gathering evidence, documenting threats, and coordinating with law enforcement. But nothing could fully prepare them for the unpredictability of David, a man whose temper and secrecy had grown unchecked for years. It began with an ordinary evening that descended into chaos. David returned from a late meeting, agitated and unusually silent. The children sensed immediately that something was wrong. Emily had a sinking feeling in her chest, a premonition that the storm they had been preparing for had arrived. David's eyes darted across the room as he muttered under his breath, accusations hanging in the air like dark clouds. The calm before the storm was deceptive. Every instinct told Emily that the danger was imminent. Elaine attempted to maintain composure, speaking in a measured tone, trying to de-escalate the situation. She asked her husband about his day, about the late-night meetings, and about the strange phone calls he had received. David's response was sharp, defensive, and laced with anger. He accused Elaine and the children of conspiring against him, of conspiring to ruin his reputation and expose his secrets. Emily's evidence, her careful recordings and notes, had been discovered by him. The confrontation, which had been looming for months, erupted with full force. David's fury escalated to physical intimidation. He slammed doors, hurled objects, and cornered Emily in the living room, demanding explanations she could not give. Mark, terrified, retreated to a hidden corner, silently pleading for the confrontation to end. Elaine, realizing that reason alone could not stop him, shouted for help, hoping that neighbors or law enforcement might intervene. The chaos spilled over into the night, a maelstrom of fear, anger, and desperation. The outside threats, which had loomed in the background for months, now intersected with the violence inside the home. A car parked across the street, filled with one of David's associates, became a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. Every move, every shout, every sound had consequences beyond the walls of the Johnson residence. Emily and Elaine understood that their actions in these critical moments would determine life or death. Their preparation, their careful documentation, and their courage would soon be tested like never before. In the heat of the confrontation, a single, irreversible mistake triggered the catastrophe. David's aggression, fueled by fear of exposure and paranoia, became uncontrollable. The house, which had been a prison of silence and tension, transformed into a scene of violence and heartbreak. Emily tried to protect Mark, shielding him from the worst of her father's wrath, but the unpredictability of the situation left them vulnerable. Elaine, desperate to intervene, found herself trapped between the children and David, her maternal instinct clashing with the harsh reality of the danger surrounding them. The police arrived minutes later, alerted by a neighbor who had grown increasingly concerned by the ongoing disturbances. But by the time law enforcement entered the house, the damage was done. David had confronted the consequences of his secrets and manipulations in the most tragic way possible. The family, forever altered, would never be the same. What began as an illusion of perfection had ended in heartbreak, fear, and loss. In the aftermath, investigators pieced together the sequence of events, uncovering the web of lies, intimidation, and secrets that had led to the tragedy. David's dealings, both inside and outside the home, had created a chain reaction that no one could stop. Emily, Mark, and Elaine were left to navigate the ruins of a family destroyed by deception, fear, and unspoken truths. The story of the Johnson family serves as a chilling reminder that secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of emerging, and when they do, the consequences can be devastating. Trust can be shattered, safety can be lost, and the illusion of a perfect life can collapse in an instant. The family, that once appeared flawless to the world, ended in tragedy, forever marked by the weight of hidden truths.